this morning, I want to actually piggyback something that Tullian has been really talking about heavily the last 2 weeks, which is just the culture of grace that we have tried to establish here, that we want to have, that we need personally, Tullian needs, that we need personally. And so this morning, I want us to take a look at a passage in Galatians. It's in Galatians 5, chapter 13 through 14, and it says this. It's real simple, real simple. For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. So this passage in Galatians is part of a broader letter from Paul to the Galatians in Galatia. So he is very passionate in this letter. If you were to read the whole book of Galatians, you would understand that he's very, very passionate about what he is saying to the people that are Christians. He's speaking to other Christians in Galatia. And what he's telling them is, after he has already been there and already told them about this amazing grace of God, he's shared the gospel with them before. And now they're bickering over people getting circumcised and not following the Jewish law, not following the Torah. And he goes, remember, Jesus came to not abolish the law, but to fulfill it. It's done. So nobody else has to do any of these things that you're pressing them to do. It's done. Jesus did it. So now we live in that freedom. Remember, brothers and sisters, this is what we're doing. We don't have to worry about those things anymore. So what they were doing is going back to the flesh. That's what it's called in the Bible. You'll read that over and over. It's going back to fulfilling the law, where we're trying to perform, we're trying to do things in order to get God's grace, in order to get God's good things, in order to be loved by God. We think we have to do something, and we fall back in that trap a lot, don't we? And so we always have to be reminded of grace and what it is and the freedom that it gives us. And so that's what Paul is doing here. And he says one of the ways to keep from falling back to that old way of thinking, to being judgmental, to being critical, to being legalistic, is to serve someone else, is to help a friend, love one another, love your neighbor. He's saying go out and get out of yourself and what you're doing and go love your neighbor. That's one of the best ways that you can not go back to the old way of thinking, go back to the law. Live in this freedom that you've been given. So he says, love your neighbor as yourself. These are things that you would want. You would want to be treated fairly, in a way that is gracious. We're not saying, just love your neighbor and, let them do whatever and just be gracious, be gracious. We're saying grace is something so amazing that it gives us the freedom to not be as judgmental and critical and legalistic as we normally would be, because we're counting who's doing what, and we're keeping score, and we're worried about getting ahead and getting higher on the ladder, getting further on the treadmill. And for me, this is a message that I need all the time, and it's also a message that you need all the time. That's why when Tullian stands up here and he's like, I've got one bullet in my gun, and it's just the gospel, and I'm just going to keep pounding it in your head over and over and over, because we need to hear it over and over. Martin Luther once said, when his people said, why do you keep saying the same thing? He's like, because you still don't get it. Because you still don't get it. Because I need it, and you need it. And this is what we're saying here at the sanctuary. So the last 2 weeks, Tullian has explained this. He said, this is how we talk about grace. This is our culture of grace. This is what a culture of grace does. And this is how it encourages you to live in freedom, a freedom that Jesus gave to you by and through his life and death and resurrection. It's a gift. And so for Paul, he was impassioned about this as much, I would say, as Tullian is when he is up here. I'm sure Paul was as impassioned, probably not as much. I don't know if anybody can be as impassioned as Tullian is. And also, there is such a paradigm shift when you understand and you realize that God doesn't need anything from you. God doesn't need anything from you. He demanded perfection from you. and you were unable to deliver it. And so what he did is send a rescuer to rescue you from having to do that because you couldn't. So he demanded that you be perfect. He demanded that you love him with all your heart and soul and mind, but you couldn't. So he sent Jesus. So you're free from that obligation. It has totally been finished for you. And so in saying that and in understanding that, we become freer people. So the things that plague us, anxiety, depression, the things we just sang about, those things plague us because of a place that we're living in slavery still, a place that we're still captive to the law in some way, a place where we don't accept ourselves, where we are less self-aware than we could be. And so on the announcements, Lindsay, thank you for your debut of announcements. Loved seeing you there. This is an important message, not just because it's your freedom, but it's because it's a freedom about your neighbor too. God doesn't need your good works. Your neighbor does. Horizontally, we benefit from helping, loving, working with each other. My neighbor benefits. God needs nothing from me, so now I'm free to give to you what I might be trying to do for God, to get his approval, to get his love. Your neighbor needs that. Your neighbor is the one who needs your love. Your neighbor is the one who is in need in a horizontal way. Because all of us vertically have everything we need. But it would do us a great good for my flesh and for yours if I were to love my neighbor. And who is my neighbor? Well, my primary neighbor is my husband. It is Tullian. It's our children. It's our grandchildren. It's our family. It's our family here. It's the people that God brings into your life each and every day, moment to moment. And as I was reading through this and just thinking about Tullian's last two sermons, and thinking about this upcoming round of Discover that we're going to do. Discover is just basically a class, a workshop where we are unpacking the 12 steps of AA. And this might turn some of your ears off because you're like, well, I don't have a substance abuse problem. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not a sex addict. I don't know what the 12 steps are. I don't really care. I don't think I need them. You do. FYI. I've never had an alcohol problem, a substance abuse problem. I've never been addicted to the degree to anything that I need to go to rehab for that, except for just life in general. We are all codependent addicts. We are all, as I have unpacked in previous sermons, we are a codependent people. That is what we are. We all fall on the spectrum of codependency. We are all addicted to something, whether it is attention, it is a substance, whether it is shopping, athleticism, performance, careers, finances, you name it, we've made it an idol and we are addicted to it. We make everything under God's good and great purview idols and things that we're addicted to. And so what are those? I don't know for you. Maybe it's, you're addicted to attention, and so you get really jealous and angry and manipulative. Whatever you are, these character defects that you have, I have. I actually brought a small list of one of my old inventory lists, because that's one thing you do when you go through the 12 steps. You make an inventory of several different things. One of the things you do is make an inventory of the ways that you've been hurt and the ways that you have hurt others. And one of the lists that you make are the things that you fear. One of the lists you make are the things that you are angry at. One of the lists that you make is all about your sexual history. So all of us have this archaeology. And when you get it out on paper and you actually start looking at it and dissecting it and understanding it, it can help you become free in ways that you are not. It can show you places that you are enslaved. You become more self-aware. You become more God-aware. The two go hand in hand. When we become more self-aware, if we're honest, that's really, if we had to sum up steps 1 through 11 of the 12 steps in one word, it would just be honesty. Honesty. All of the first 1 through 11 steps are begging you asking you, giving you the opportunity to just be honest. Honest with yourself, about others in your life, about your history, about your present, and about what's possible in the future. We become more self-aware. We understand our human condition better by engaging with the 12 steps. And I say engaging because the 12 steps are not something that you do. They're something that you engage with, and they are done to you by and through God's Spirit. So it's not something like, okay, well, I got to do this, and I'm going to act this way. A lot of recovery, I poo-poo a lot of like recovery groups because ultimately they're putting the onus back on the person that is struggling to not struggle all of a sudden, and they're giving the power back to you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, to get better, to change, to stop struggling in that way, to not have that addiction anymore. And that's actually not what the 12 steps were intended to originally be for. And so when we unpack the 12 steps, it's just taking the gospel, this thing that we have and learn about every single week, and we unpack it in practical ways. That's all the 12 steps are doing. It is simply tools. They're tools to then practically use the gospel in our lives, however that may be for you, for me. And in doing that, we become free. And so for this particular passage, what stood out to me is that it was a lot like step 12. I said 1 through 11 is summed up in one word, honesty. Step 12, if I had to give it a phrase or a word, which I do in Discover, I would say it's sharing the love. It's outreach. Step 12 is taking all this that you've learned, all this freedom having power that actually lives within you, and you're taking it out to the world. You're sharing it with your neighbor. That's what step 12 is. It's taking what you've learned, whatever that might be, even if it's this much. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a lot or a little. That's up to God and what he's doing in and through you. So in AA, their step 12 says this: having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. That's what AA's step 12 says. And in Discover, I changed the wording. This is not just for women, P.S. Yes, I meet with women, and that's what, that's who's in Discover Workshop, but this is not gender specific. This is in general for all humans. Our step 12 says, as a result of our engagement with the steps, we've become more sober-minded, self-aware, and awakened spiritually. We will try to share and practice what we've learned with others whenever and wherever possible. And I specifically chose those words because it's not a given that you're going to be able to do it. We're going to try to. That's what we're saying we're going to do. We're going to try to. And so in order to break down step 12, it's really about 3 different things, because as a result of these other 11 steps in understanding my freedom that I actually have in Christ, the power of God to help me deal with my struggles, to help me cope with my addictions, to help me stand myself until the grave. That we're not curing anything. The steps don't cure you. People don't go to recovery places to get cured. They go to get help and learn how to cope with their failure to be good, their failure to not be addicted, their failure to not struggle anymore. You can't, as I've said before, choose all of a sudden one day to not be an alcoholic. We can't choose not to be sinners. I don't want to sin. I hate that my sin hurts me. I hate that it hurts people I love. I hate that it hurts the world around me. I hate that my sin hurts other people. And it has, and it does, and it will. I can't choose to not be a sinner. No more than, and where it says alcoholic in AA, just change that word for sinner. Put that word in there, because that's really who it's talking about. It's really talking to us, all of us, sinners, people that have recognized that we are broken this side of heaven, that we can't fix ourselves, and we can't depend on the people around us to fix us either. We can't depend on our profound skill or our strength or our passion to fix us and get us up the mountain and over to the other side. We can't depend on any of that. We're sinners. We need help, and we need ways to cope with our sinfulness. That's what the 12 steps help you do. They help point out your sin, because step 1 is just actually realizing you even have anything to deal with, and some people don't even get to that point. But step 12 is really like outreach. It's really sharing the love. And in this verse in Galatians, for you have been called to live in freedom, in steps 1 through 11, my brothers and sisters. But don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. Put what you've learned to use somehow. Now, how do you do that? How do you engage that? What does that look like? A lot of people will automatically sign up for half a dozen things that they have no business signing up for to do, and they wear themselves out, and they're like, they literally end up at a bar or in a hole in their room, just absolutely depressed, filled with anxiety, because here it all is again. That's not how you do it. You don't just go out and sign up for everything that you think seems like, well, this is outreach. This is how you do this. This is how I love my neighbor. I go sign up to serve at the soup kitchen, or I go feed the homeless. Those things are not unimportant, and those things are well and fine to do. But once you figure out the ways in which your flesh, your sinful nature hinders you and affects other people, but you have this freedom and this power of God working in and through you to heal you, to help you cope with this, you may find other ways to love your neighbor, to help one another. And may I suggest that maybe it's just being a greeter at the sanctuary. Maybe it is singing in a worship group. Maybe it's putting envelopes in the back of a seat in the auditorium. Maybe it's making coffee and serving muffins and cookies out there. These people in this room, these people online, this is a recovery group. We are talking about how to recover from life, from sin, death, and the devil. This is what we do every single Sunday. In here on Sundays at 10:30, this is the largest recovery group that I attend weekly. This is it. And when we can serve one another, if you were to actually go to an AA meeting, there's coffee always, and there's chairs that are set up. And sometimes it is simply a smile, a hug, a handshake. Here, you want a cup of coffee? To help somebody get out of their own head, to get out of their own feelings, to get out of their own ways of thinking that are not serving them well, that are keeping them captive, that are keeping them enslaved. So serving one another doesn't have to look like some giant ministry. I'm going to start a podcast, and then I'm going to do a vodcast, and then I'm going to start a blog, and I'm going to start a Facebook page, and I'm going to start populating it with all blah, 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 blah. That usually, ends about 6 episodes in, because people are already tired, and people are already just, it's cyclical. I say this all the time. We're just going round and round here. It's not linear. So it's not like I heard the good news, I'm free, so now I'm going to volunteer. Somehow in my life, I'm going to serve other people, and I'm just going to keep progressing. No, you're just going to come right back around. You're going to go right back over that pothole that you did before and you fell right into for a long time. Maybe this time around, it's just a little bump. Maybe you don't even realize you're going over that tract of land again, because God has healed you and you didn't even know it, because you weren't trying to specifically work on that one area. You're trusting. Really, all recovery is not trying to stay sober-minded. It's trusting that God will keep you sober-minded. That's his business. That's his job to do in you. That's his work to help you. It's his job by and through his Spirit to do that. And that's what the 12 steps are telling you. That's what they expose. Here is you, and here is God. And you are just going to keep doing this and be not sober. You are going to fail in all of your ways to be sober, whether that just means without a substance at all, meaning sober in my thoughts as just a human. I get drunk on adoration, drunk on attention, drunk on my feelings, intoxicated by my feelings, intoxicated by what I can do today, what I can accomplish. Like I said, character defects that we discover when we do the 12 steps are usually really ugly. They're a defect. They're not a, we can be like, I'm very motivated and organized. Maybe you're a control freak, Our weaknesses can be our strengths, and our strengths can be our weaknesses, and they can be on a sliding scale and all over the map at times. Some of my character defects, and this is just a tiny portion of them from one line. Here are some of mine: jealousy, greed, holler out if you have any, self-pity, arrogance, laziness, selfishness, hate, blame casting, egotism, hypocritical, pride, resentment, self-justification. It's one of my favorites. Abusive tendencies, verbally or otherwise, dishonesty, impatience, fear. Those are just a few of mine. I just stopped because I was like, I'm just going to go on and on. So these are some of my character defects, which are part of the thing that you uncover when you go through the 12 steps, and rightly so. I need to know these things about myself. I need to know where they hide and how they come out, where they're triggered, maybe where they stem from. Ultimately, they stem from my heart. The heart of the human problem is the heart of the human. It is that our wicked, deceitful hearts. That really is the problem underneath all problems, right? We can trace it all the way. It was my mom, and then I had this when I was a child. All of that is true, and it is not unimportant. It is, in fact, I believe it is one of the highest, best, most useful things we can do is to unpack all of our archaeology and see what's really in there and why we do what we do and why we have the tendencies we do, and face them, look at them. Like Steve Brown says, kiss the demons on the lip. Right there in the mouth. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not afraid that I'm going to have a drink. I'm not afraid to be in the presence of that person anymore. I'm not afraid to let you get close to me anymore because I realize why I kept people at a distance. I'm not afraid anymore to be in a crowd. I'm not afraid anymore to do what? What is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you can't stand? What is it? Who is it that you are angry with, that you resent? And how does that infect every other place of your life? This is what we unpack in the 12 steps. And when you unpack those things and you do it over and over, this is not a one and done. We are, as I said, we're never cured, and we're never done with treatment. We're never done with our recovery. Recovery is cyclical, and it is lifelong. And when we accept that, then we don't have these like, okay, well, this is my goal. And if I don't meet it, it throws me way, way, way back. Just know that the goal is that God wants to set you free in ways that you are enslaved. He wants you to believe and trust in him. He wants you to stop trying and to trust. And that's what the 12 steps help you do. They help you understand that your trying and your best efforts have gotten you right where you are. Whatever your largest struggle, right now, if you had to say, my hardest, most heaviest thing in my life right now is fill in the blank. Do you trust God with that thing? And if not, why? Why don't you trust him with that part of you? Why don't you trust him with that person or that relationship? What is it about that thing that you feel equipped to carry. You're not equipped to carry. I don't even know what it is, but I know I'm not equipped to carry the things that I have been carrying. That, like I've used the analogy before, I will carry every grocery bag from the car on my arms, and I will make it up to the top of the stairs into our kitchen to unload them instead of, and this is God's message to us. You're free. You do not have to carry those things. I've carried them for you. I've done it for you. You're free from that. You don't have that chore to do anymore. Stop trying to carry it all and just trust me. Trust me, I got you. This is what he's saying, and this is because of this passage in Galatians gives you the opportunity to go, oh, okay, I don't have to, nope. So I don't have, oh, okay. Could I help you with something? Is there something that I could help you do? Husband, do you need anything? Wife, could I just go get the mail today for you? Could I make dinner? Could I clean the dishes? Somebody at work, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I help you with what? Help someone else. Like, that's what this is saying. It gets us out of our own heads. One thing that I have come to know, which was one of the first major things I came to know 20 years ago on my first try at inventory, was that I am a performance addict. I wanted to do well. I want to be an honor student. I want to graduate with honors. I want to go to college. I want to win the game. I want to be the best at that. I wanted to be a high achiever. And in one way, it's not bad to want to do well at what you're gifted at doing, at using the skills God has given you. But when it becomes a life or death situation, then that's a problem. It becomes a problem. When your whole entire emotional state hinges on whether you make an A on the test or not, there's something off, okay? There's something wrong. And so the first time that I did inventory and discovered that, I was like, okay, well, I got to figure out how that is. There's always something that I knew was not enough. You feel that too. You feel that you're not enough. We all do. I haven't found a single person in any inventory in 20 years that I have ever communicated with. I haven't even heard from a person that I counsel with that thinks they are enough in some way or that they are right. I remember telling my parents after my first divorce, which I've been divorced twice, if you don't know, and Tullian is my third marriage. And so talk about wanting to achieve stuff, and then I don't know if that's like I've achieved a lot or I achieved all the things that I didn't want to achieve, which is I wanted to be married one time, forever, for all of this life, to one person. But, Mama didn't raise no quitter, so here I am. But my point is, the thing that we idolize and holding on to, I remember telling my parents in just like a tear-filled moment after I completely demolished my first marriage by cheating. And I remember telling my parents, just looking at them, and it is as loud in my ear right now as the moment I said it. I said, I just want to get something right. I just want to do something right. Like I want it to turn out right. I was 32 years old at that time. And I felt like, although there might have been some things that were, tons of things that were good in my life, I knew that something's not right. I'm trying to control things, and I'm enslaved in ways that I don't understand, and I didn't know why. And just within a year later, after that, within that time, that was when I was introduced to the 12 steps. And I was introduced more so to the gospel for the first time. Even though I was a lifelong Christian, I grew up in a Baptist church. I grew up in church. I don't remember a moment in life where church wasn't a part of my life. So it wasn't because I didn't know God and I didn't have people to talk to me about God and about his love for me. It was me. It's my human condition, the part of me, the inner sinner that I can't get rid of, that I can't control her. It's like an old AA adage says, the only choice, an addict doesn't have a choice not to be an addict. They have the choice between beer, liquor, or, Coke. But they don't really have a choice not to be an addict. We don't have a choice not to be a sinner. Now, we can learn new habits. We can learn new patterns. We can learn stuff about ourselves, why we drink, why I do drugs, why I smoke, why I do A, B, C, or D, why I'm addicted to pornography or sex or shopping or whatever the thing is that we're addicted to. We can learn why we are, and we can trust God to help us steer clear of the ways that those things completely demolish us and the people around us and our lives around us. Because of AA and because of what we say here at the church, we really do believe that they are so intertwined. When we are going out in our outreach, in our loving our neighbor in whatever way that looks like today, maybe it's just being nice in traffic. I mean, that's a big one. Maybe it's just not being an angry driver or angry in the grocery line. This is the fast lane, and it's like 10 or fewer items, and she for sure has 20. Like, why? Why do I get so angry at that? Why would I be mad at that? What's in me that makes that come out? Why can't I just be patient? So really, what we're doing when we leave here, when we leave this recovery group, how we go out and we love one another is really captured in a quote that it's been attributed to a few people, but it's one beggar showing another beggar where to find bread. That's that simple. That's all it is. It's one beggar, which we are, you are, even if you don't feel like a beggar, you are. We are sinners, we are beggars, we come poor and needy. This is how we are. Even if we don't see ourselves that way, even if people in our lives may not see themselves that way, there is a posture of us. The vertical is completely saint. We are saved and we are righteous and we are holy and we are God's beloved daughters and sons. And there is nothing that can change that. We are forgiven. We have received all the mercy that we need. There is nothing more we need vertically. Horizontally, living still on this earth, we are still sinners. We still wrestle with our flesh. Our sinner and saint is just, they're constantly doing this inside of us. Learning that helped me make sense of why I wrestle with the things that I do. It helped me wrestle with, understand the wrestling, the struggling, the striving, why I do those things. And so when I learned this by people being beggars showing me where they found bread, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. It's the best piece of bread I could have. Y'all know I like bread. But the 12 steps are really helping us find the bread, locate the bread, understand the bread, and then go share it with someone else. That's really what we're doing in here every Sunday morning. We're learning about this feast for failures, right? The meal for misfits. The grace of God that has come to us in the shape of his Son, in his life and death and resurrection. This is what we are taking with us when we leave and we are able to go out into the world and love our neighbor. It doesn't have to be, although it can be, you do not need to go to a far-off country or a destitute city in America to go on a mission trip to go serve your neighbor. You can. I'm not saying you shouldn't. That might be your gift. But that's not what this is. This is not just talking about being a missionary out in the world. It's being a missionary right where you are to the people that are already in your life. They're the ones that need you. It's one reason we are so very, very lightly unprogrammed here at the sanctuary. Because we really do believe that loving your neighbor at a coffee on Thursday mornings, at the Rancho Chico on Thursday nights, or here with another group that you're a part of on Sunday mornings when you're in the lobby with the volunteers and you're having your meeting in Harbor with the kids, teaching those little kids about the love of God for them. This is where we take the bread and we are showing it to somebody else that seems hungry, right? You don't just shove the bread down somebody's throat. You don't just go, here, you need to eat this. You ever been around a Christian that's like, you don't go out and just say, here are the 12 steps and you need to do all of them right now. Could you get your pen and paper out and like, let's get going. You don't shove bread down anybody's throat. They usually can smell it, right? Steve Brown also, he says, when people smell like Jesus, it's attractive. People want to know, why are you so happy? Why are you free? Why does it look like nothing ever bad has happened to you? I assure you that it has, but I can tell you why I can smile today, given, my character defects and just my resume of life is, I'm born to a mom, a teenage mom. My mom was 15 when she had me. Her mom was 15 when she had her. There's 30 years between my grandmother and I. I was determined to not be a teenage mom. I was determined not to get pregnant before I graduated high school. That's a really lofty goal. But right after I graduated high school, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't marry the father. I had my oldest son, Cole, who was 31. I've been married twice before Tullian. I've been divorced. I have divorce on my resume. I have cheated. I have been cheated on. I have been a wretched friend to people. I have been a wretched daughter to my parents. I've been a bad sister. I've been a bad friend. There's a lot of things in my life that if we sat down and we just talked about all of the hardships that I've caused or that I've experienced at the hand of just the world, because it's hard and it's cruel, and so are other people at times. So the thing that helps and has helped is understanding more about myself and more about God. So the Step 12 is actually an unofficial outreach program, but it doesn't have to look like a programmed outreach. It doesn't have to look like something legalistic. It can be something you do every Tuesday, or it can be something that you do today. Right now, we're just hoping for the next moment. The future is in the morning. We have today, right now. So how am I going to love my neighbor just today? And if you don't love your neighbor, is that going to change God's love for you? Not one iota. Not one little piece of it will be detracted from you. He will not withhold not one piece of his love for you. He will not withhold 1 ounce of his forgiveness. He will not go, well, I was going to give you the mansion over there, but because you're being like you are, you're going to go live on this street. Like, I'm not going to give you the one that you thought, because God has nothing to do with anything like that. He has nothing to do with the picture that has been painted of him being a conditional God, a legalistic God. He's a loving God that has given you the freedom that you need to embrace your neighbor, to love your neighbor. So most of those places that you find on your inventory, that you discover, the hard places, the things that really hurt, maybe a relationship with a parent, ex-spouse, child, coworker, whatever it might be, those are where your unplanned ministry is. The places that you didn't plan, the places you would never plan, the places that you're like, oh, I'm really skilled. For instance, I owned and operated a florist when I was in my 20s. I bought a flower shop, and that's what I did. I married and buried people. I did all the flowers for those things, and I would like a ministry in flowers and beautiful things, and putting together, beautiful centerpieces and do weddings and blah, blah, blah. And although I can do those things, that is not where God has my unplanned ministry, the one that's the heaviest and the one that I know the most, the one that I know the best. Those are the places that I have failed and that I have needed God to speak loudest in my life. That's my unplanned ministry, is really the thing that does the most service to my neighbor. That's why we're here. That's why we even moved here. Both of us have a huge, clear, unplanned ministry in our failings, in our relationships, personally. And those unplanned ministries that neither one of us would ever write in as like, oh yeah, and right here I want to cheat, or I want my marriage to break down. Could you make sure that happens? And then I want to get divorced again. And then nobody wants to have the unplanned ministry items on your life's resume. None of us want that, but they are. God has allowed them. You have something valuable that someone else needs, that your neighbor needs. Just earlier this week, I spoke with a woman that is part of the sanctuary. She has been for almost 3 years, and she doesn't live here. And she had messaged me several times. We were coordinating when to talk. Because she said she is married. She has been for over a decade. And she had an affair for over 4 years with a married man. And this is a common story that both Tullian and I both hear often. And it's sad, it's terrible, it's horrible. And she said, I just wanted to talk to someone that could say, me too. And I'm her. I'm her me too this week. My unplanned ministry made me able to love my neighbor in that way. So some of the things that you think are the ugliest parts of your life, the heaviest things, the biggest struggles, the worst moments, the most shameful things, God can, and I believe that he will, show you how he can use those to love your neighbor, to be the outreach that he's really talking about. Not just so that we can put our name on something and say, oh, look at the sanctuary. We provided 4,228 meals to blah, blah, blah. That would be wonderful if we could do that. I'd love that if we could do it. But that doesn't seem like what our ministries here are about. All of you in the seats here online, you have an unplanned ministry. And it is lying somewhere in your inventory in steps 1 through 11. And step 12 is asking you to share that with your neighbor, however you can, whenever you can. I wanted to read something this is the book I primarily use for Discover. It is a book called Grace in Addiction by John Zoll, who is one of our friends. He is one of the sons. He's the oldest son of Paul and Mary Zoll, our mentors. And this book is him unpacking the 12 steps. He is an Episcopal priest. He is the rector of a historic church in Bedford, New York. And not Bedford. That's not where it is. I forgot. But he wrote this book several years ago, and you can tell I've used it a lot. It is one that I go back to often because it is so incredibly useful, and he believes in AA, the 12 steps of AA, and the church gleaning from each other what they can to do and be what he believes the church is called to be, what as the bride of Christ the church is called to be. He says this, the main principle at work in the 12 steps is that God shows up to meet the defeated and the weak, the lowly and the paralyzed. It is a principle that Jesus enacted and taught repeatedly throughout his ministry. He said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." To the extent that people acknowledge their failings, they find and appreciate Jesus. And because there is so much honest acknowledgement of that reality in the world of AA and addiction, one very often finds more redemption, more actual healing, and more transformation than in the church, in spite of the fact that these are the same people who know themselves still to be addicts. In closing, the church would benefit tremendously from the presence of more 12-steppers in its pews. No one can help Christians reconnect with the heart of their own message better than sober alcoholics. This word of love for the loveless shown, distilled so profoundly in AA, is not only what Christians need to reclaim for themselves, it is also what the wounded world at large so desperately craves. It works where other approaches fail. It heals where other approaches hurt. It brings hope where there is none to be had, because the message, Jesus, is hope himself. This is true for you, whether you've ever stepped foot in an AA meeting or any kind of recovery meeting. You're in here, so you're in a recovery meeting. Ipso facto, you're in a recovery meeting right now. But no matter if you've ever actually sat in one, I encourage you to. That is where the hope is found, in the freedom that God is who he says he is. And he has done what he says he's done in the person of Jesus. And what is most personal and unique in you is something that he would love for you to see shared with a person and go, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I could share that with somebody. That would matter in the way. All the things that are good about you are awesome. But the things that you wrestle with and struggle with, someone needs you to be there. Me too. Me too. Thank God I have your ear to listen to me. Thank God that he brought you into my life when I needed you. I'm not alone because I have a me too here in this circle, this group of ragamuffins. This is what we are. And so I read this again with maybe new ears to hear. For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters. But don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. This is what Jesus has done for you. He has loved you. He has loved you to the very bitter end. He has loved you with no holds barred. He has not withheld any good thing from you. He will not take his love away from you. He will not take his forgiveness away from you. He won't take any good thing that he has given you away. And I pray that you would remember that and take that with you when you go today, to love your neighbor, even if it's, somebody in the lobby after church that just needs a smile. The smallest whisper of love means the world, and we don't understand that. And I pray that this helps you just to realize loving your neighbor doesn't have to look like some of the trappings that we ensnare ourselves in. It looks like Jesus loving, just being himself with people, around people. So take that with you today. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for the fact that you have loved us so well. I thank you for reminding us that because we are loved in the way that we are by you, we can love other people. We love because we were loved by you through your Son, Jesus. Through his life, through his perfect life that you demanded that we live, and he did it for us. You demanded all of these things from us and then gave us the very answer. You loved us so well. God, I thank you for your mercy and your grace, your undeserved favor, the gift of love that we as a people do not deserve. We are unlovable in our human state. We are completely unlovable, but you have loved us still. You have not turned your face away from us, no matter what unlovely thing we have done, are doing right now, or will do in the future. You will not turn your love away. You will not turn away from us. You will give and keep giving, and it is a gift that we are astounded by. Help us to believe that it's true. Help us to believe that we have it. Help us to be honest with ourselves, about ourselves and about you. God, give us the strength to love our neighbors in the ways that you have given us the opportunity to do so, whatever they may be. Help us to trust you, point us in the way of loving our neighbor, God. Remind us that you need nothing from us because your Son did everything you asked of us. Today, God, I pray that you would press it deep down in our bones, in our minds, in our hearts, that you love us, that your amazing grace is always with us. God, we thank you for it. Help us to believe it. It's in your Son's precious name that we pray. Amen.